I am Phil Alitea, and we return to the Confessions of Saint Gregory the Great. I have decided I don't want to see my face on this one, and you might notice that the audio isn't as good as it could be. I've had a lot of change in my routine this week, and so I forgot my controller and my microphone. So the Final Fantasy VII content that you get today will happen later in the day, and we might not we might not relax with Final Fantasy One. We'll see. It all really it breaks down to depending on how my stuff charges today, because the most important thing right now is charging my external battery so I can do something in the tent with my phone. Content that my phone will charge and be available to me in the morning should, anything go wrong, or should I wake up and get over myself and just start recording some game right there in my bed. Usually what I do is I use my mornings to correspond with my friends, confidants, and Patreon subs to help them get started with their days. So we stopped last time in the middle of this chapter, and a lot of that had to do with just my own circumstances. So we're just going to pick up right down here at the bottom of the page, and we're just going to keep reading, because intermittent engagement is a good way to learn. And so we'll remember what happened last episode as we continue, and if we don't and you would like to know, just scroll to like maybe 15 or 10 or 15 minutes of the last episode. Watch that last 10-15 minutes, and then on we move. I don't know if you can hear that, but I am very hungry today. We need to take time and stop and thank Mr. S for his contributions. I do have $50 on which to eat, but it's a pathology within me. I don't like to eat until I have accomplished a goal, and I haven't accomplished any goals yet today. Hell, I haven't even jerked off. So, no goals accomplished. Nothing worth rewarding myself with food yet. So I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to spend some of his money here at Panera on something to eat, and then I'm going to find something else to do for a few hours, and then I'm going to spend some of his money at Taco Bell and Dollar Tree, and then I'm going to go back to the tent, and I'm going to spend a few hours trying to amuse him while his life kicks him repeatedly in the dick, and help him get through that difficulty. So thank you. Take time in your day to just say thank you to Mr. S. You can do that in the comments on this video. If you're watching live, you can do that at the end. Hello, the 11 of you. I did not realize you were there. Thank you. I'm ready to move on now. We begin at: a certain nobleman, likewise called Felix, of the province in Nursia, father to Castorius, who now dwells here with us in Rome, understanding that Aquidius had not received holy orders, and yet that he did visit many places and preach to diverse, upon a day very boldly went and asked him how he durst presume to preach, not having received holy orders, nor yet license of the Bishop of Rome, under whom he did live. The Bishop of Rome will come to be called the Pope, and that's the office that Gregory is holding as he writes this book. But from the dialogue, we can piece together that he was not the Pope at the time this story was taking place. Upon which demand the holy man, being thus compelled, gave him to understand by what means he had obtained license to preach, speaking thus to him: "What you say to me, myself have seriously thought upon. But on a certain night a young man in vision strode by me and touched my tongue with such an instrument as they use in the letting of blood." That is I think those are called a lancet, the real sharp knife, basically like a scalpel. Saying, "Behold, I have put my word into your mouth. Go your way and preach." And since that day, though I would, I cannot but talk of God. And this is another motif that happens throughout Christian literature, whether it be like this, oral reports that are being written down, or actual stories written later. the vision of a person touching your tongue and saying, "This is my word." That's an old motif that will continue in Christianity all the way up into the modern era, but it was an old motif before Christianity. This is kind of where prophecy as such comes from. And so Peter, the student of Gregory, and it's not really a student so much as a friend and confidant, and somebody that he intellectually spars with, asks or states, "Desirous I am to know what manner of life he had, this Felix, who was a wandering preacher but not educated, who is said to have received such gifts at God's hand." And yeah, that child is understood to be a vision or a visionary form of Jesus, because it calls itself the Word, or rather it says, "Behold, I have put my word into your mouth." It's understood to be an aspect of Jesus, which to these people is understood to be one of the triune aspects of the all God. Their theology was and Gregory, writing this as Pope, his theology is very different than what you're going to hear in church on Sunday anywhere in the world today. Gregory responds to this request with, "The work, Peter, proceedeth of the gift, and not the gift from the work. Otherwise grace were not grace." And so what he's saying is that the truth of this person's prophecy and his teachings and the way that he's bringing people to God through Jesus is proof thereof that he's doing the work called upon him, not the fact that he's going out here and doing this and it is having an effect. That he's going out here saying the thing, saying it's not from him and it has an effect, that's proof that it comes from God, is what he's saying. For God's gifts do go before all works of ours. And what he's saying, grace means the happenstance that it happened. That's what grace means. Grace means the chance that it happened. It happened by the grace of God. That's how it happened, but that it happened is also the grace of God. So the way that they would use this idiomatically is they would say, the grace of God happens by the grace of God. So what happens because it happened, is what he's saying there. And it wouldn't have happened because it happened if it had happened any other way. Than that he went out and taught these things without expecting to get a benefit in return, which I don't expect any of you listening to tip. I would like for you to tell Mr. S thank you for his tips. But he does say, although the gifts by the work which follow do increase, but to the end that you may understand what life he, that is this preacher Felix, had, which was known to the reverend man Albinus, bishop of Rheatino, and many there be yet alive, which might very well remember the same. But what do you seek for further works, when as his purity of life was answerable to his diligence in preaching? So he didn't do things separate from what he said in his preaching, basically. He was diligent in his preaching. He knew what he was saying. He was prepared to say it. He was prepared to back it up with historical precedent. He knew where the things he was saying came from. Even if they seemed idiosyncratic to him, he was saying, look, this is not my opinion. This is the opinion of the Word of God, which is another name for Jesus. But that is also another way of saying Sophia, wisdom. It's true because it's been true for thousands of years, is what this guy, or what he is saying about this wild preacher Felix. For such a zeal to save souls had inflamed his heart, that albeit he had the charge of many monasteries, yet did he diligently travel up and down, and visit churches, towns, villages, and particular men's houses, and all this to stir up the hearts of his auditors to the love of heavenly joys. And here he's saying that even bishops don't do this, and this is in the 550s AD. Even then, bishops were not leaving their monasteries, they were not leaving their dioceses and teaching at particular men's homes. But this guy was evidence of God's grace because he left his charges, he left his responsibilities. And remember how this book opens. This book opens with us telling us that Gregory retreated from his worldly responsibilities as Pope to talk to this person, actually to be alone, and this person joined him. And now what's he doing within that conversation? He's talking about somebody who Gregory looks up to as an example of how to be a good Christian, because this guy didn't retreat from his worldly concerns. He took them on higher and higher and higher abstractions of individual human beings. And so when I say on some level that I spend my mornings talking to my correspondences, it's because I'm doing my best to visit people where they live at their very homes as individuals with the Word of God. His auditors to the love of heavenly joys. What that means is not what it sounds like. He's telling this person, these people that he's engaging with, to love what makes the ghosts of the past happy for us. That's what heavenly means. The ghosts of the past who are watching us. Continuing on, the apparel which he wore was so base and contemptible that such as knew him not would have thought scorn so much as to have saluted him, though himself had first offered that courtesy. I could turn on my camera here. Thank you for the likes, the 3 of you that liked it, and I understand that the 11 of you were just passing through. But for the future, I'm going to turn on my camera here. If you don't know me, I'm homeless. And I have been wearing this outfit, this white shirt, this pair of pants. Specifically, I've been wearing this white shirt since Monday, but I have been wearing a white shirt like it for maybe 3 weeks, because I have 6 of them. But this pair of pants that I've been wearing, as stained and dirty as it's starting to get, I have been wearing since the last time I did laundry, because I was wearing a pair just like it the day that I bought these so I could do laundry. And so I'm going to read that again for you. I am a little disappointed that none of those 11 hung out, but that's probably more to do with my connection than to do with them. And I do appreciate the 3 likes. And you know what? They might have taken me up on my encouragement to go back and watch the other one. So if I have 3 new views on the other one, you know what? That's a heavenly joy. That will make me feel just the very best. Okay, so we're going to reread this. The apparel which he, this traveling priest, or this traveling holy person, not a priest, who did have responsibility within the hierarchy of the church, his apparel was so base and contemptible that such as knew him not would have thought scorn so much as to have saluted him. That is, they would have rather frown at him than wave hello. That is my lived experience. That's why I was showing you my clothing. That such as knew him not would have thought scorn so much as to have saluted him, though himself had first offered that courtesy. And that courtesy is, they would have rather frown at him than wave back when he says hello. And that happens. People ignore my greetings. And wherever he went, his manner was to ride, but that upon the most forlorn beast which could be found. I love that word, by the way. You can't say that word today, but whithersoever means wherever, but whithersoever is it's just a whimsical way to say wherever, and I like it. And anyway, he rode on a forlorn beast. That means like an ill-tempered donkey or a half-dead horse. His bridle was but an altar, his saddle no better than plain sheepskins. And this is because this is the most antique. If what he's trying to do is what I suspect he's trying to do, Felix, the way that Felix arrived at his teachings was by trying to live the life most authentic to the earliest Indo-European ancestors, then what he would do is live in a way that is as little between him and a wild animal as possible. So he wouldn't use a bridle, because a bit in a bridle they're a piece of metal that you shove between a horse's teeth, or the animal that you're riding, or that you're harnessing, between their teeth, at the back of their teeth, so it sits in that space between the back of their teeth, and when you tug on it, it hurts like a motherfucker. That's how you get them to comply with you. And so this guy gets this animal that he rides to comply with him, not through violence, not through extreme measures of pain. In fact, all he has to control it is a halter. He just has a halter, which is basically just a harness around the muzzle of the beast. But the beast can ignore that, and it doesn't even sound like he's willing to pull on it. Like, it really doesn't even sound like he's got reins for this thing. It just, he's wearing the halter. And then when he's talking about just a sheepskin between it and its body, a saddle allows you to not communicate with the animal as you ride. They didn't have stirrups back then. Stirrups will be developed in the Middle Ages. But a saddle allows you to sit on the animal and force a seat on it to conform to you and your comfort. But a sheepskin forces your body to conform to this highly uncomfortable animal. You have to understand, if you've never ridden a horse, and I have never ridden a horse, that it has hips like you do, and so and shoulders like you do. So as it pumps its legs, its body is undulating, and those bones are moving around. And that's why if you watch people who ride, they have to undulate with the animal. And so this guy, what Gregory is telling us is that he communicates with this animal. He is bonded to this animal in a way much more closely akin to our very earliest Indo-European and Proto-Indo-European ancestors than modern, contemporary to the 6th century Romans and their Christian contemporaries. He's talking about Christian contemporaries who live lush, rich, spoiled lives, but not this guy who didn't have a teacher. Continuing on, this Felix, his books of divinity were put into leather bags, and those he did carry himself, some hanging on the right side of his horse, and some upon the left. And to what place soever he came, he did so open the fountains of sacred scripture, that he watered their souls with the heavenly dew of his sermons, whose grace in preaching was so great, that the fame thereof came even to Rome itself. And as the tongues of flatterers do with their glorious words kill the souls of such as give them the hearing, at the same time some of the Roman clergy did in flattering sort complain to the bishop of this apostolic see. I'm going to stop here for just a moment, because it's important that you understand that in the secular world of rumor and roads traveling, carrying information, Rome was not the capital of the Western Roman world. Ravenna was. So when he says that even to the city of Rome, which by 550 was a backwater and had been sacked by the Goths in the 4th century, in the 350s, I think is when that was. It happened during Augustine, and Augustine is long dead by Gregory, is my point. Rome is a backwater. So when he says that this news of this guy even made it to Rome, and within the cloistered politics of Rome, even there, the clergy complained to the Pope about that. And this is what they said about him. What manner of rustical, also pagan is the word you could use there, companion is this, that has taken upon him authority to preach, and being without learning, not learning here means being without education, presumeth to usurp to himself the office of our apostolic Lord. Usurp himself the office of our apostolic Lord. Apostolic Lord here does not mean Jesus. It means the Pope. So basically what the sitting Pope in 550 is telling us in this story that he is recounting to his friend Peter is that a previous Pope was flattered by these people saying, this guy is going around making you look like an asshole. Continuing, wherefore, if it please you, let him be sent for before your presence, that he may taste of the severity of ecclesiastical discipline. End quote from them. The Gregory continues, and as it falleth out, that he which has much business is overcome sometime by flattery, that is, the Pope, because he was busy, didn't know what they were talking about, and was overcome with their flattery, if that pleasing venom be not speedily dispatched from the soul, that is, if you don't learn humility early, and you don't learn that flattery, things like hearts showing up in your comments apropos of what you're talking about, if you allow that flattery,
or rather, if you allow that pleasing venom to be not speedily dispatched from the soul, at the persuasion of his clergy, the Pope gave his consent that he should be sent for to Rome, to understand what talent and gift he had received from God. And so one Julianus, who afterward was made bishop of Sabinum, was sent, having yet commandment given him to bring him up with great honor, to the end that the servant of God might not thereby sustain any injury or detriment in his fame. Now, so basically what the Pope is saying, look, I know that you guys want me to bring him here and have him beaten, but we are going to go through this like civilized people. We are going to use due process, and you are absolutely not going to accost him on his way here. You are going to be better than United States policemen, and you will be. Who, to gratify the Pope's clergy, went in post to the abbey, and finding there in his presence certain antiquaries writing, demanded of them for the abbot, who told him that he was in the valley at the bottom of the abbey, mowing of hay. Julianus had a man very proud and stubborn, and such a one that he could scarce rule him. This man he sent in all haste for the abbot, who in an angry mood went his way, and coming quickly into the meadow, where beholding all that were there cutting of grass, he demanded of them, which was equitus. And when they showed him where he was, being yet far off, he fell into a great fear, and became therewith so faint that he could scarce go upon his legs. Do you understand what's happening here? The Pope has this Julianus, the guy that's flattering him. Basically, he has these people that are flattering him send their most verbose and masculine bishop, and once he sees this guy, he falls to his knees, trembling. In that manner he came to the man of God, and humbly bowing down his head, he embraced his knees and kissed them, telling him that his master was desirous to speak with him. And so what that means is that even upon seeing this guy, he realized that he wasn't a charlatan, wasn't a fake, and that he actually became afraid of him. Like we were talking, like Gregory was talking with Peter about the priest who beat up his friend and his friend accepted it. This guy, this big, masculine, verbose, gregarious, boisterous, I'm gonna boss people around. He's got a real high intimidation score. He sees this guy and he's afraid that this guy's gonna beat him up. After God's servant had saluted him again, he willed him to take up some of the grass and to carry it home for their horse. And I will, he, straightways come, when I have dispatched this little work which remaineth. In this meantime, Julianus... Now, this is important, actually. Because you're used to politicians saying, yeah, I'll get around to doing what you told me to do. You're used to criminals saying, yeah, I'll get around to doing what you're doing, to show a lack of haste. But understand what this guy is doing. He is mowing a patch of grass by hand, effectively one blade of grass at a time. He might even be using something akin to scissors, but he's probably using a hand scythe, not the kind of scythe that your hipster boyfriend uses when he wants to make the grass look fucking terrible. Alright? This is slow and agonizing work that this guy is doing. Okay? That this priest is, or that this holy man is doing. Slow and agonizing. And so you have to understand that most young people, most monks, most of the people tasked with doing this thing, if they're given any excuse, let alone that the Pope wants to see them yesterday, they're going to leave that work unfinished and for somebody else to do, because they might even leave the fucking tool in the grass and leave in that moment, expecting that they're going to get away with that wrongdoing because the Pope wants them. Not this guy. I will come as soon as I have finished this very important work, because this is my responsibility right now in the eyes of God, and the Pope can wait, because if something happens to us along the road, the Pope will wait. So because I have been given this task by God, I am going to complete this task for God, is how this guy handles this situation. In this meantime, Julianus much marveled what the matter was, why his man tarried so long, and seeing him at length to come laden with grass upon his neck, in great rage he cried out to him, saying, Sirrah, what meaneth this? I sent you to fetch me the abbot, and not to bring me meat for mine horse. Sir, quoth the man, he will come to you by and by. And forthwith the man of God came in base apparel and a pair of shoes beaten full of nails, carrying his scythe upon his neck. And being yet far off, his man told him that he was the abbot. So soon as Julianus beheld him and attired in that base sort, he condemned him, and devised with himself how to speak to him in the most cross and crooked manner he could. But when God's servant drew near, such an intolerable fear came upon Julianus that he fell a-trembling, and his tongue so faltered that he could scarce deliver the message for which he came. So, again, these people are sitting around and they're thinking, oh, I'm going to say the most poisonous shit. I'm going to say the worst thing I can possibly. I'm going to think up just the most horrible things that I can say to this guy, because it's within my purview to say these things to this guy. I'm allowed. It's my job, in fact. I'm going to get myself all wrapped up in the righteousness to spew forth venom upon this person, because it is my impatient right to do so. And the moment that guy came within earshot, he falls to his knees, because that would have been the wrong thing to do. Why? Because Jesus tells us to forgive. And what is forgiveness? What is forgiveness? It's mercy giving in the future. And this person had worked himself up. He'd worked himself up to do what was his right, to unleash the wrath that was his by right in violence of word and action. But he couldn't, because this guy deserved forgiveness. Because this guy is better. That guy can't give mercy to this guy. This Julianus deserves, he's asking for mercy. He needs mercy from this Felix, because it's within this Felix's right as a holy person to go right up to him and beat him half to death with a stool right there in front of God and everybody. I don't care what stole you're wearing. You probably stole it anyway. Upon the receipt of which news the venerable man, Equidius, gave Almighty God most hearty thanks, saying that heavenly grace had visited him by means of the highest bishop. And straightways he called for some of his monks, commanding horse to be made ready in all haste. But Julianus, weary of his journey, told him that he could not travel so soon, but of necessity shall rest himself that night. I am very sorry for that, quoth the holy man. For if we go not today, tomorrow we shall not either, I'm adding. And thus, by reason of the other's weariness, he was enforced that night to remain in the abbey. The next morning, however, about the dawning of the day, came a post with a tired horse. A postman, somebody bearing a letter. Bringing letters to Julianus, commanding him not to presume to molest or to draw the servant of God out of his monastery. And when he required the reason of this counter command, you understand we're talking about miracles and we're talking about syncretism. And so the night before, Felix told Julianus, if we don't start now, we're not going to start tomorrow either. And then tomorrow morning, somebody arrives with a letter from the Pope. And when he required the reason of this counter command, the messenger told him that the next night after his departure, the Pope was terribly frightened in a vision for presuming to send for the man of God. Whereupon Julianus, rising suddenly out of his bed and condemning himself to the venerable man's prayers, spoke thus to him: Our Father desireth you not to trouble yourself any further, but to stay in your monastery. Which, when God's servant heard, very sorry he was, and said, Did I not tell you that if we did not set forward on our journey by and by, that afterward we should not? Then upon charity he entertained his messenger a little while with him in the cloister, and though by all means he refused, yet he enforced upon him a reward for the pains he had taken. And so he tipped his messenger, even though the messenger refused the tip. So understand, folks, that the reason I hold my hand out and the way I hold my hand out is because in order to be a man of God, I have to be able to refuse it. Or I have to be unable. Rather, let me just say that. In order to be a man of God, I have to refuse the money. Or I have to be unable to refuse it. So if you send it to me via Cash App, PayPal, or Venmo, the only way I can refuse it is by refunding it to you, sending it back to you. I can't tell you, no, please don't give me money. Which means, please give me money. I need help. But I have to say no. I have to say no. Because that's the way of God. That's humility. I can do without it. Please, thank you. Keep it for yourself. You need it more than I do. At which point you're supposed to insist, no, fuck you, take it. This is sin money and I need you to clean it. That's how this works. St. Gregory the Great is describing it to you right here. From 550 AD. Then upon charity he entertained his messenger a little while with him in his cloister, and though by all means he refused, and by entertained he means he talked about him, he got to know him a little bit, he told him a story, he fed him, and then he tries to give him money. He enforced upon him a reward for the pains he had taken. See therefore, Peter, how God does preserve and keep them who in this life do contemn themselves, and how they are secretly honored of the citizens in heaven, who are not ashamed outwardly to be little esteemed in this world. And on the contrary, in the sight of God, they be of no account, who in the eyes of their own friends and neighbors do swell through desire of vain glory. And so I say again, I am not interesting. I am a boring person. I am fundamentally inadequate to what I am doing. But God is worthy of the glory. And if God puts it on your heart that I'm allowed to eat today, then I'm allowed to eat today. And if God puts it on the hearts of these people that walk through this patio and see me talking about God and then look away in shame, if he puts it on them to look away in shame, then they will look away and be ashamed. And it is my responsibility to be forgiving, even if you don't truly understand what mercy is. And therefore, says Gregory, our Savior Christ, who is truth itself, who was Aletheia herself, said to certain, you are they that justify yourselves before men, but God knoweth your hearts, for that which is high to men is abominable in the sight of God. Peter says, I marvel very much how so great a bishop could be deceived and so worthy a man. To which Gregory says, why do you marvel, Peter? For the reason why we are deceived is because we be men. What, have you forgotten how David, who usually had the spirit of prophecy, pronounced sentence against innocent, that's a name, Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, when he gave credit to the lying words of his servant Ziba? Which thing notwithstanding, because it was done by David, we both believe to be just in the secret judgment of God, and yet by human reason how it was just we cannot perceive. He's talking about grace. It was just because it happened, and it had to happen, because it happened the way it did. What marvel then is it? It's just because that's just the way it is. What marvel then is it if we that be not prophets be sometimes that should, if we that be not prophets, that shouldn't have a comma there, be sometimes by lying tongues abused and otherwise transported. Let's read that again. What marvel then is it if we that be not prophets be sometimes by lying tongues, that should be commaed out, abused and otherwise transported, then charity and justice would. For it is much to be considered that every bishop has his mind troubled with a world of business, and it cannot be when the mind is distracted about many things, but that it is the less able sufficiently to examine those that be particular, and so much the sooner is he deceived in some special case by how much he is busied with the multitude of many. I don't think I need to parse that out. I think he said it perfectly. Peter says, "It is much true that you say, or most true that you say." To which Gregory responds, "But I shall not pass over with silence that which the reverend man Valentinus, that is, probably the Valentinus of Gnosticism, sometime mine abbot told me concerning Equites." Probably it's not that. "For he said that his body being buried in the oratory of St. Lawrence the Martyr, a certain country man set upon his grave a chest full of wheat, little considering or respecting how worthy and notable a man lay there buried." They can't finish their sentences with prepositions in Latin, so it wouldn't be buried there. They have to say lay there buried. Whereupon suddenly a miraculous whirlwind came and overthrew that chest and cast it far off, all other things remaining still in their former places, by which all did plainly perceive of what worth and merit that man was whose body lay there buried. To this shall I also add another thing, which I heard of venerable Fortunatus, a man that does much please me for his years' life and simplicity. At such time as the Lombards came into the province of Valyria, the monks of the monastery of the reverend man Equites fled from thence into the oratory to the man's holy sepulchre, into which place the cruel men entering, they began by violence to pull the monks forth, either to torment them or else with their swords to kill them. Amongst whom one sighed, and for very bitter grief cried out, "Alas, alas, holy Equites, is it your pleasure, and art you content that we should be thus miserably haled and violently drawn forth, and dost not you vouchsafe to defend us?" Okay, so you understand that effectively Vikings have got these men trapped in their oratory, and they're going to kill them, and so they pray not to God, but to Equites himself. Which words were no sooner spoken, but a wicked spirit possessed those savage soldiers in such sort that, falling down upon the ground, they were there so long tormented until all the rest of the Lombards, which were without, understood of the matter, to the end that none should be so hardy as to presume to violate that holy place. And thus, as the holy man at that time defended his own monks, so did he likewise afterward succor and preserve many more that fled to the same place. And yeah, Lombards are effectively Vikings. They're from northern Germany or Scandinavia. It's effectively the same tradition. So the Viking Age is a misnomer in every way. Chapter 5 of Constantius, clerk of the Church of Stephen. That which I intend now to tell you, I learned by the relation of one of my fellow bishops, who lived in a monk's weed many years in the city of Ancona, and led there a good and religious life. Many also of mine own friends, who be now of good years and live in the same parts, that means be now old, affirm it to be most true. Near to the foresaid city of Ancona there is a church of the blessed martyr St. Stephen, in which one called Constantius, a man of venerable life, did serve there for clerk, who, for his virtue and holiness, was famous far and near, being one that utterly despised all worldly things, and with the whole power of his soul thirsted after the joys of heaven. Upon a certain day it fell so out that there wanted oil in the church, by reason whereof the foresaid servants of God had not wherewith to light the lamps. That means they didn't have anything around. Whereupon he filled them all with water, and, as the manner is, put a piece of paper in the midst, and then set them on fire. And the water did so burn in the lamps as though it had been very oil. By which you may gather, Peter, of what merit this man was, who, enforced by necessity, did change the nature of the element. And so I was talking with a friend earlier today. Hey, buddy, Madge, you don't read this or listen to this stuff, but hey, Madge. About how Catholicism was magic. Buddy, Jesus literally turned that water into wine. He literally walked on water. He literally turned that bread into his body. Literally. Magic, transformation, transmogrification. I don't remember the word. Transmutation. At the formative moment of Jesus' ministry, he is performing magic, and not ritual magic.
He doesn't have to pray. He doesn't have to walk 15 times in a circle and draw a diagram on the ground and ask for permission. No, he says, this bread is my body, and it is. This wine is my blood, and it is. It happens because of his command, because he is the word. His word is so true that it's not a metaphor. That's what all of those metaphors mean. And Peter says, very strange it is to say that, but desirous I am to know what humility he had inwardly in his soul, who outwardly was so wonderful in the eyes of the world. And Gregory says, among miracles, very fitly do you inquire the inward state of the mind. For it is almost incredible how miracles wrought in the sight of men do with their temptation inwardly assault the soul. But after you have heard only one thing, which this venerable Constantius did, you will quickly perceive what an humble man he was. And I was actually telling my buddy Madge just today that, the work of trying to enlighten people, trying to get people to awaken the flame of reason within their own bodies is exactly what Gregory just said here. It is incredible how miracles, how the awakening of the flame within one's soul, wrought in the sight of another person, does tempt them inwardly to do the same thing for themselves. But after you have heard only one thing, which this venerable Constantius did, you will quickly perceive what an humble man he was. And what he's saying is that when people see me making money online, or they see anyone making money online, when young women see, I see it all the time on TikTok, let's talk about it, young women, even older women, women my age or older, get on TikTok and they're doom scrolling, they're making their little vlog posts, their little thing, and they're not getting the kind of attention that they want, and so they're like, well, what happens if I show a little cleavage? And then suddenly likes and comments, and it's like, oh, okay, so I can be a professional at this if I'm naked, and they don't care what I'm saying, they don't care what I'm talking about, they just want to see the shape of my body. Okay. And then they immediately sell out to do that thing. Immediately sell out. I've watched probably 20 women just doom scrolling over the last 2 days. I've watched probably 20 women come to that realization. And so, like, I have acquaintances that I see trying to do the same thing as men, not show off their body, but okay, well, how can I make money at this thing? How can I make money at this thing? How can I quit my bullshit job? And how can I make money at this thing? The answer is, well, you can't. You can't. Because you're not humble enough. Neither can they. Not real money. Not life-changing money. You're not humble enough. None of the girls who are making what they think is life-changing money is humble enough. They're not actually making real money. They're never going to send a daughter to college on that, because they're never going to find a man stable enough to let them have a child with him. You understand? They're not going to have a child who's stable enough psychologically because of watching their mother and her psychopathologies take control of her life. They're never going to have a child that's stable enough to actually go and be somebody, because they're not humble enough. And Peter says, having now told me one of his miracles, it remaineth that you do edify me also with the humility of his soul. Rightly so. And Gregory responds, because the report of his holy life was very much spread abroad, many from diverse countries traveled to Ancona, being very desirous to see him. And amongst others, a certain country fellow was come far off, for that very purpose. At which time it is so chanced that the holy man was standing upon a pair of wooden stairs, busying himself there in mending of lamps. A very little person he was of stature, with a thin face, and to the outward view contemptible. This fellow that came to see him inquired earnestly which was the man for whose sake he had traveled so long a journey. And you don't see it as much now, but if you're my age or older, we can kind of imagine that this guy suffers. This person, this poor, suffering person that's gone to visit our holy person, this famed holy person, this person suffers from fetal alcohol syndrome. Those that knew him forthwith told him, pointing to Constantius, but as foolish souls do measure the merits of men by the quality of their bodies, so he, beholding him so little and contemptible, by no means could be persuaded that they told him truth. For in the country fellow's mind there fell out, as it were, a great contention between that which he had heard and that which he saw. But he verily persuaded himself that he could not be so little in his eyes, who was so great in his former conceit, and therefore, when very many did constantly affirm that he was the man, the simple soul despised him, and in scoffing manner, okay, I said that backward, I understood that backward. The country person is a big, stout country guy, and our holy person, Felix, right, he suffers from fetal alcohol syndrome. He was probably abandoned by an alcoholic, probably a very, very low-level prostitute, probably not even a prostitute, probably just an alcoholic getting by turning tricks at the bar. And so the holy man, the person who has this shriveled face and small body that suffers from fetal alcohol syndrome, he says to this big, robust country person, I verily believe that he had been a goodly great man, but this fellow has not anything at all in him that is like a man. Which, and you know what, I say that all the time about bodybuilders and these people that want to be men's rights activists or want to stand up and be demagogues and leaders in the masculine community. I say that all the time. You look at them, and sure, they look good, they are dressed well, or they spend a lot of time sculpting their bodies in the gym, but there is nothing about them which is godly or even masculine. They behave, in other words, like whinging women standing around looking at mirrors, waiting for someone to pick them. The pick me. You're all of you are litters of puppies sitting in a window waiting on somebody to pick me. How much is that puppy in the window? That's what TikTok is. Which words of his, the servant of God, Constantius, hearing forthwith, left his lamps, which he was in hand with, and in great haste came merrily down the stairs, embraced the country clown, and, of exceeding love, held him fast in his arms. He just said to him, there's nothing about you that's even masculine, and I despise you. But take this hug. I love you. Thanks for having the opinion that I'm small and ugly and that God doesn't love me. And you only, he says, have thine eyes open. Oh, I'm sorry, so look, he embraced the country clown, gave him great thanks for having the opinion, weird. This conversation is hard for me to follow. But anyway, I guess what's actually happening is that Constantius is there while the little ugly guy is there to see the big man, and then the big man doesn't talk to the little man. He actually talks to this Constantius and says, "Oh, he's a great that he must be great because he called me not a man." Yeah, so Constantius, not the little guy, goes over and hugs the big man and thanks him for having that opinion. And then he says to the little guy, you only have thine eyes open and dost truly behold what I am. By which fact we may easily gather what an humble man he was that loved the country fellow the more for contempting him. For injurious words and see, we're understanding the moral here. The way he's telling the story is confusing for me to follow. But the moral here is that big, strong, strapping lad sees this guy who suffers from fetal alcohol syndrome and assumes that he did something wrong, that God cursed him with a mother who couldn't, handle her cups and didn't think that what she was putting into her body would affect her baby, and that somehow that has something or anything whatsoever to do with who this person is. So like the people who jump in my comments and want to say things like accusing me of being a crackhead just because I choose to be homeless so I can do this thing I'm doing right now, they are being that big strapping lad. Oh, you think you're so beautiful because on the outward
You appear to be fine. And then what the little man says is, yeah, but on the inside, you're barely even human. And so then the priest goes over and hugs somebody and admits that the one who said, yeah, but you're you and your workout body and your perfect hair and all that money you spend to look beautiful so that women will take notice of you, that leaves you a woman. It leaves you less than human. I was saying that very loud to a guy who looked just like that. He stood to listen. He deserved to hear it. By which fact, because the little guy opened the big man's eyes, by which fact of the little guy showing the big man that the big man is less than the little man, by which fact we may easily gather what an humble man the little man was, that loved the country fellow all the more because the big strapping country fellow hated him. For injurious words and contumelious usage, try what a man is inward in his soul, and try here means not, it doesn't mean attempt here. There is no try, because the word try means to annoy effectively, to distress. And so what he's saying here is that the contumelious usage affected negatively what a man is inwardly in his soul, for as proud men are glad of honor, so an honor here is when other people say good things about you, but not to you. So those that be humble, for the most part, rejoice in contempt and disgrace, and when they behold themselves to be of no account in the opinions of others, glad they are. Yeah, so when you hear me say things like, yeah, and nobody's watching my shit anyway, and then I smile and laugh, I'm not being passive-aggressive. It means I'm right. It means that I'm just. It means that I am this ugly holy man. Because they see that to be confirmed by the judgment of others, which inwardly their own souls they had of themselves. To which Peter says, this man, as I perceive, was outwardly great in miracles, but yet greater by his inward humility of soul. Hey, thanks the two of you for being here. Thank you for that additional like. We move on to chapter 6. I didn't mean to read this to pat myself on the back, by the way. I'm just always finding new ways to articulate who and what I am and why I'm doing this evidently insane and productive thing I'm doing, choosing to be homeless and to try to improve your life in a meaningful way, rather than to just make as much money as I can before I die. Continuing on, chapter 6 of Marcellinus, Bishop of Ancona. Gregory says, Marcellinus, also a man of holy life, was bishop of the same city of Ancona, who was so sore troubled with the gout, that is, that's the disease where your toes swell up, and you get it by being rich and eating too much red meat. That being not able to go, his servants were enforced to carry him in their hands. Upon a day, you can't have gout. You just can't have it. You can't not locomote for so long that your feet swell up and try to fall off. And you can't have servants to carry you around to cope with the pain if you're not rich. Anyway, his servants were enforced to carry him in their hands. Upon a day, by negligence, the city was set on fire, and though many labored by throwing on of water to quench it, yet did it so increase and go forward that the whole city was in great danger. For it had laid hold of all the houses that were next to it and consumed already a great part of the town, none being able to help or withstand it. And so pitiful a necessity and great danger, the bishop, carried by his servants, came thither, and commanded himself to be set down right against those furious flames. And in that very place where the force of the fire did seem most to bend, which being done, the fire marvelous strangely turned back into itself, and as it were, cried out that it could not pass the bishop, and by this means was it stopped from going forward, and went out of itself, not being able to touch any other buildings. By which, Peter, you see what an argument of great holiness it was for a sick man to sit still, and by his prayers to quench those raging flames. I both do see it and much wonder at so notable a miracle. Yeah, it is definitely notable, because rich people can't get into heaven. And so Gregory here is doing a little bit of propaganda, saying, well, you know, even our very rich, very decadent bishops can still have a positive effect on the community by putting other people's lives in danger. Hey, it worked out for the best. All's well that ends well, right? Right, Peter? That's what Gregory just did right there. Chapter 7 of Nonassus, prior of the abbey in Mount Soracte. Soracte, that's hard to say. Gregory says, now I intend to let you understand somewhat of a place not far distant, which I heard of the Reverend Bishop Maxianus, and of the old monk Lario, one whom you know, both which are yet living. And as for Lario, he was brought up under that holy man Anastasius, and the abbey which is hard by the city of Nepi. I guess that means nearby? I'm not sure what hard there means. And Anastasius, both by reason of the nearness of the place, equal love of virtue, and like profession of life, was daily in the company of holy. No, there's not. There's a mess on my screen that looks like a period. Of holy Nonassus, prior of the abbey which is in Mount Soracte. This Nonassus had for his abbot a very sharp man, that means smart, witty, intelligent, whose rough conditions notwithstanding, he did always bear with wonderful patience, and did in such sweet sort govern the monks, that oftentimes by his humility he appeased the abbot's anger. Now here we go. Rough conditions means that he grew up poor, so he can be rude, and rudeness here means not thinking before he's speaking. I have it. There it is. I have this tickle in my sinus. Oh my god, that just will not quit. Rude of languor, rudeness. How am I trying to say this? Rudeness of speech and character is what he's talking here. And how did he say it? Roughness of condition. Your condition, as you know from Psych 101, is your conditioning, right? It's what you've learned from your environment. So his roughness of condition means his lack of social refinement. Is what he's talking about here. That's what that means. Whose lack of social refinement notwithstanding, he did always bear with wonderful patience. That is, this bishop, this Honorius, the abbot always took this Nonassus. He took him well, and sometimes the rough nature of this Nonassus's behavior appeased the abbot's anger with the other monks and their refined conditioning, let's say. The abbey, standing in the top of an hill, had never an even and plain place fit for a garden. One only little plot of ground there was on the side of the mountain, but that was taken up of a great stone, which did naturally grow there, so that by no means it could serve for a garden. Do you understand what he's saying? That it's a rocky place, there's no area that they can plot out to have a little garden for the monastery, except for this one spot that has a rock. Okay. Yet venerable Nonassus, upon a day, began to think with himself that at least that piece of ground would serve very well to set warts, W-O-R-T-S, like the warts from the story of the thief that was stealing them, and the snake that guarded them, if by any means that huge stone could be taken away. But then he likewise thought that 500 yoke of oxen would not be able to stir it. You understand that this rock is so heavy that not 500 oxen could move it. Whereupon, despairing of all human help, he betook himself to God's goodness, and in that very place gave himself to prayer in the quiet time of the night. And, behold, on the morning, when the monks came thither, they found that huge stone removed far off, and a very fit plot of ground left to make them a garden. At another time, the same holy man, being washing of lamps made of glass, one of them by chance fell out of his hands and brake into many pieces, who, fearing the great fury of the abbot, did forthwith gather up all the fragments, laid them before the altar, and there with great sighing fell to his prayers, and afterward lifting up his head, he found the lamp entire and whole. Now, just mechanistically real quick, This is possible, according to quantum mechanics. Possible. Entirely improbable, but possible. That he looked away from it, wanted it to be what it was real bad, and then looked back just in time to observe it being that, and because he observed it and measured it being that, it stayed that forever. It is entirely possible that his cognitive state, his belief, and his ability to imagine that vase as it should have been, it is entirely possible that this happened. And that's all we're going to say. We're just going to move on. And thus, in those two miracles, did he imitate two notable fathers, to wit, Gregory and Donatus. The first of which removed a mountain, and the other made a broken chalice safe and sound. Peter says, we have, as I perceive now, miracles after the imitation of old saints. And so what these two are agreeing is that there is an old efficacy that goes beyond Christianity to the mechanism by which these impossible things are happening. And Gregory says, how say you? Are you content also in the conversation of Nonassus to hear how he did imitate the fact of the prophet Halesius? And Peter says, content I am, and most earnestly desire it. To which Gregory says, upon a certain day, when the old oil was spent and the time to gather olives was now at hand, the abbot, because their own trees took not, thought it best to send the monks abroad to help strangers in the gathering of theirs, that, for the recompense of their labor, they might bring home some oil for the necessities of their own house. This determination the man of God, Nonassus, in great humility, did hinder, lest the monks, going abroad from their cloister to get oil, might lose somewhat in the devotion of their souls. You understand that what he's saying is that if they go out and do the thing for themselves, and God does not provide it for them, there is a chance that what they're going to go is, well, because God didn't help us, God's not real, effectively, something to that effect. It's going to hurt their souls. And so he says, no, I know we have a shortage or a scarcity of olive oil right now, but we'll cope because God will provide us more. And this is how the story continues from there. And therefore, because he saw that their own trees had yet a few olives, he willed those to be gathered and put into the press, and that oil which came forth to be brought to him. Though it were never so little, which being done, he set the little vessel before the altar, and after their departure he offered his prayers to God, which being ended, he called for the monks, commanding them to take away the oil which they brought, and to pour a little thereof into all the vessels which they had, that each of them might have some of the benediction of that oil. Which being done, he caused the vessels, empty as they were, to be stopped, and the next day they found them all full. So effectively, the Hanukkah story keeps happening. So like today, little kids ask the question, well, why doesn't God still talk to us? Why don't miracles still happen? And in Gregory's day, that was a question, to which Gregory had the answer, they do. Peter says, we find daily the words of our Savior to be verified, who says, my Father even to this time does work, and I do work. All right, we're crossing about an hour. Thank you for that 4th like. Thank you for still being here to watch me. I'm starting to get hungry, and it is pouring ass rain. But I'm not getting wet, so until that changes, I'm just going to keep reading as an evidence, I guess, of my being a water wizard. Oh, now the wind is going to blow in my face right as I say that. So we'll see what happens. I'm sorry, this isn't going to be good listening. I'm sorry if you want to duck out. I'm being indecisive, and I know that's bad listening. My keyboard's going to get wet. I got to go inside. All right, this is going to be surprise ended right now. Thank you for being.
Hey, Neebs.
Hey.
I'll introduce you to somebody.
Okay.
Follow me.
Can I hear their name already?
Yeah.